Welcome to 100 Proof Radio with Jay Wesley, your weekly journey into examining your spirit choices and social etiquette in different settings. Do you know the written and unspoken rules about ordering and consuming alcohol during a night out on the town with your friends, at office holiday parties, or when hosting at home? Well, pour your favorite drink and get ready for an unfiltered, enlightening, and comfortable ride. Sip back and relax. And welcome to 100 Proof Radio with Jay Wesley.
So for those of you that's out there watching in this episode of Cocktails, New Orleans, and Diversity, we will explore what is the right answer. Can bartenders claim to be colorblind? Do you really see the person and their culture to appreciate them? Is this the answer to diversity issues, to be colorblind, to have respect for all people, or is it more than that? Or do we need to recognize it, discuss it, attend trainings to prevent it, and strategize on how to fix it? However, if the bar industry is afraid to have open dialogues about it, that as such as what we're having today, how can we change it? So, Josh, I'm going to take it to you. Why are people in this industry afraid to discuss race, stereotypes, biases? If we don't discuss it, how can we change it?
Well, I think it's a hard conversation to have because it's really none of us have been educated on the right way to talk about this. I mean, just strictly, is it person of color? Is it African American? Is it black? Like, just how to describe the problem is a problem. And so when you start to get into it, there's so much room for misinterpretation. And I think that especially in the social media culture where, you know, one person says something and it gets blown up, and then there's, you know, the social media lynch mob and all that. And so, you know, you may be coming from a good place, but you put your foot in your mouth, right? And you didn't mean anything by it, but because of your own ignorance or the fact that it's mainly ignorance, I think, that you don't know the impact of what you're saying. So we had an amazing example of this where it was contextual, right? We did an event for Pride this year, and the penicillin is a sick cocktail. In the bar community, everybody knows what the penicillin is, and so we do a beautiful penicillin with Barrows and 10 Ginger Liqueur, plug, and so we did it as one cocktails for, and people in the LGBT community didn't know that penicillin was a traditional cocktail name. And so they viewed it as a slight about penicillin and venereal diseases, and we got a whole bunch of hell for that. And changed the name, pulled the cocktail, like everything, and super apologetic. But it's that context. We didn't mean anything wrong by it. It's just because that wasn't something we would ever think of, because we're coming from our bubble of the bar community, we got burned on it. And I think that's why those conversations are really hard, is that you don't always know the impact of what you're saying, and so someone can get hurt by it because these conversations are really close to the heart for everyone involved. And so it's dangerous. And so people are risk averse, and it's easier for me to say nothing than for me to put myself out there and get, you know, and screw up. And I know a lot of times I'll see a thread on Facebook and I'll want to, it's just not worth the risk of, you know, blowback or something else like that. Now, there are other times where I got to jump in there regardless because someone said something they shouldn't, and I got to stand up. And I feel a certain obligation as a white man to step in because, unfortunately, I can say things that I have privilege, and so if I can use that for good, then I'm going to do it every time I can.
Absolutely. So I appreciate those thoughts. So, Jen, I'm going to bring it to you. A lot of people do not want to have this conversation. Why is that?
Well, as Josh says, it's a difficult conversation to have. Most people, most white people, don't see themselves as, or they're like, oh, we don't see color, and they don't understand how that in and of itself is racist. Because we do live in this microcosm, this bubble. I worked with Tales of the Cocktail for a few years in a row. I saw what happened to Ann and Paul. Do I think that what happened was wrong? Yes. Do I think that people outside of the New Orleans community understand the situation behind it? No. And then they're talking about tradition as people who haven't lived in it. And so we're trying to defend that, and they think that we're trying to defend the word that came out of it. And
We'll get into that a little bit later.
yeah. But because of that, we are immediately having a lot of discussion, and we're trying to navigate around it and use the right language and not offend people, but bring them to the table. And, you know, as a woman for a long time, it was hard for me to get a seat at the table. I wouldn't normally be in a position to manage this brand the way I am. So
What brand is that?
Ghost Tequila. Ghost Pepper Infused Tequila. It's really spicy, but not as spicy as you'd think. So give it a shot, even if you don't like spice. I hate spicy food. I still love it. I drink it every day. But yeah, we are having those conversations, and I hope more and more the cocktail can be the catalyst, because everybody wants to go sit at a bar, have a drink, you know, chat, you know, with your neighbors, and I hope that we can keep this going and have it be 15 years from now, 20 years from now, have it not be an issue.
So Matthew, what do you think about what these two have just stated?
Well, I think let's look at the words we're using. That's like we said. People are using the word racist. Racist indicates to me that you think your race is better than mine, which I think we're using the wrong words. I would say ignorant, maybe, uninformed, or like it's prejudging or prejudice, possibly, but not racist. I think racist is such an extreme descriptive word that people like to use so quickly. And I don't feel that the informed or the intelligent base, the majority of society, engages in the mud like the few choose to. So if Yelp is the best example, one person gets upset and they think that they can take to Yelp when 99% of the experience is positive, but one person decides to try to write something, use social media as their platform, because now that one angry voice is multiplied. And I think we need to look at it from, is the underinformed or under-engaged, possibly racist, I think is so extreme. I don't feel that the level of prejudice or racism is where it was. There was a time that the French Quarter only allowed white people, okay? And the only time NOPD would engage, because it was so bad and so corrupt, was the call NITQ. Now, NITQ is nigger in a quarter. That's what somebody got arrested for. You were allowed to work in the quarter, and then you had to leave the quarter the second you were done. If you hung out in the quarter, you were arrested. And this was a practice for many decades. So that is an extreme situation. Now we're talking about a name of a drink that somebody gets offended by, and the world goes up in arms. And I think that we have to stay informed, and we have to have clear wit and have some satire and some humor in how we operate. We just can't constrict ourselves to say, well, we might offend somebody, so we can't do it. Here in the business, we have restrooms. And instead of saying men and women or just images, we have taco and burrito, because it's a tequila house, and it's your own interpretation. You know, not to offend anybody. My wife didn't talk to me for 3 days because she thought I was crass, but it's funny. Taco and burrito, you pick the bathroom you choose to go into, and that's it. And you have to engage your society and yourself with a sense of humor, a sense of humility, have some fun, not be so serious. And I think sometimes the words we choose, like racism, it's such a polarizing description that people choose not to have a conversation because they don't want to say the wrong thing, and all of a sudden they're pegged as a racist. Well, you just may not be informed. You may not know a sect of people, and I think that's what we need to work hard on.
For those of you that are just tuned in, we are on the 45th episode here in New Orleans at the Tequila House on Bourbon Street, talking about cocktails and diversity. Is there ever an appropriate time and space to host uncomfortable conversations about race and stereotypes? Is it only appropriate to discuss these topics when they explode on the national scene, like the situation here at Tales of the Cocktail last year with former owner Ann Tunerman and her husband, the Starbucks incident, or the Me Too movement? Jen, why do we have to wait until things to have the conversation?
I really wish I had an answer for that because more and more, something that happens and you can see it, it gives people cause to start talking about it. I wish it wasn't the case. I wish people could have these conversations. But like I said, it's like we're tired. All the things going on in the country and around the world, there's so many things wrong, and we systematically want to make all of them better. After Katrina, we had a thing called cause overload, where we didn't know where to start. We didn't know how to help. We wanted to do it all. We wanted to do it quickly, and then we burn out. So picking one thing and slowly having that conversation more and more and more, I think us having all of these conversations will make it more, it will just make it regular. It's like we won't have to wait for things to come up. It will just, we're talking about it. The more we talk about it, the more it's going to continue.
So Matthew, is there ever an appropriate time to have uncomfortable conversations within the service industry about race, stereotypes, and biases versus only wanting to have the conversation when things explode on a national level? So let's hear your thoughts on that.
I think you can have that conversation every day. I think it's imperative that you have these uncomfortable conversations. You don't just sweep things under the rug. We deal with events down here in New Orleans where we have to make economic decisions, and I mean that's really the baseline. All of our decisions are not based on race. I think the Bayou Classic gets a negative connotation down here in New Orleans. If anybody's ever been down here, it's the Friday, Saturday after Thanksgiving, and it's not a significant spend for the bars here. And a lot of businesses will close because it's Thanksgiving weekend. People want to be with their families. In addition to that, the people that come down don't truly patronize the businesses. So you're left occupying your business. People just want to be on the street, which is fine. But there's been unfortunate violence a couple of years ago that really sparked the conversation. There was a shooting on Bourbon Street, and it's because the wrong people come out and they create a negative environment. So businesses were lambasted because they choose to close, they choose to renovate during that period of time, and you get a lot of pressure from the administration in the past to not close your business. But that's something where we've perpetuated a stereotype of an event that I'm first to say people don't talk about. I mean, I'm saying it now, that people really don't want to be here. It's sad, versus the following weekend where there's the high school football championships and revenues for those particular businesses will be up 150% because it's a different level of spend. It's a different level of engagement. So as a owner and a purveyor of spirits, food, you want to make money. And I'm not here to just have people use my bathroom or sit on my seats, break, spill, leave, because we have to pay rent, we have to pay our bills. And we're not just here to entertain you. We're not an open toilet for anybody. I don't care if you're from Wisconsin or from Mississippi or from New Orleans here. You just can't come down here and trash our city. So anybody that does that, it's upsetting. But I think there are certain events that get a connotation of a certain economic experience from the owners. So we all get a little salty about these particular events. So we have to have an ongoing dialogue. We have to say, we have to discuss what is good, what is bad, and whether it's an employee. Now, the same regard, on a micro level, employees don't want to work that weekend because they want to be with their families. They don't get tipped, and it's dangerous when they walk to their. Have to encourage them to stay and work the hours. So those are conversations we've had to have with employees across the board because they have a preset notion of how it's going to be. So until it changes by a customer level, it's not just the industry, it's the industry's engagement with certain customers that dominates their thought process.
Rasan, if you can give me a notebook and pen, because Matthew, you said a whole lot, a mouthful, and I need a notepad to keep up with this man over here. But one of the things I want to come back to and later in this conversation is the Essence Festival, which is over 10, 15,000 people come to New Orleans for education, have a good time. And in the media in recent years, it was said that bars within the French Quarters closed their doors because there were too many black people. However, we're going to hold that conversation and come back later, and maybe Matthew, you can tell us if you know anything about that. Was that true or not? But I still want to have the conversation right now on, is there ever an appropriate time, Josh, to talk about race in our industry? Why do we have to wait to something explode? So I want to hear about what you think about what these two just said. And was it wrong for Ann Tunerman to have to be forced to give up her organization, Tales of the Cocktail, that she created based on maybe a misunderstanding, whatever the case may be, and some feel there was pure racism, but was that right? So what's your thoughts on what these two said about appropriate time to discuss race? And was it right that Ann Tunerman was forced to give up her organization?
Well, I think that my earlier statement about people are lazy is a big reason why the conversation doesn't happen, because it takes effort. It's you got to get up early in the morning to have the conversation, and it's easier sometimes to just stay in bed. But I think, and they're hard conversations to have. The more you have the conversations, the easier they become. And I think that some people look at the situation with Tales and Ann and look at that as a cautionary tale of, oh, well, I don't want to open my mouth because, I might an organization I found. But that wasn't the reason it went. That was the start. That was the crack, if you will, that exposed a lot of other issues in the organization. I think that the new organization with the foundation and the focus on charity and giving back to the community in New Orleans, as opposed to a little bit of the cult of personality that Ann had built, I think is for the long-term success of Tales. And Tales should always been more than about one person. And I think she got into trouble is that reason.
So you agree with the change?
I love the change. I think the change is great and wonderful person, and lots of thanks for building this great organization for the community. But at a certain point, things grow and change, and sometimes change in management, change in leadership is needed to grow. And as a small business owner, I've seen this firsthand where, something that you may be good at founding something doesn't necessarily mean you're good at running it, and it doesn't necessarily you're good at all aspects of it. So, and you see that a lot of times with startups where the founder, gets moved into a different position, and then they have someone brought in to run the company, because the skill set for founding a company is not always the same skill set that works for running it. Because to get something off the ground, you have to be a little brash, you have to be pushy, you have to be aggressive, and then once it's established, it changes what's needed in terms of, and so I think that it sometimes there needs to be a change there, and that's sort of scary for me to say as a company owner, that like at some point maybe I won't be the right person to run my company, but you need to know yourself, and you need to be, I think, humble. And I love Matt's comment about the word racism being too harsh, and I think that's one of the other things. I don't know how to do it, but if there is a way to take the temperature down on some of these conversations, so that when people are new to it and you can help educate them about why what they're saying is hurtful or is misinformed, and so you can bring them around to a point of view, which it's very hard to see the world from someone else's position. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons for a lot of the problems that we have, is people aren't good at doing that, just as individuals. And so then when you then scale that up to a big national, problem, and then you add in, really hard.
So we are in the midst of the 45th episode of Cocktails and Diversity in New Orleans, and we are coming up to our Causing a Stir segment. This is where you get to chime in and ask some questions. And so we want to acknowledge just a few people out there. We see Jaron out there. What's up, Jaron? All the way from D.C., Maryland. We have Tonya Neal. What's up, Tonya? Thanks for tuning in. We have Rasan Robinson. Zandra. Yes, so, okay, Zandra, we're going to hold that for just one moment. She's asking about the Essence Festival. But before we go and talk about the Essence Festival, Jen, I want to come to you, because you mentioned your appropriate pushed out from Tales of the Cocktail.
Again, I'm going to mimic what Josh said. The incident, things that were unaware within her organization. They were touting themselves as a nonprofit, as a foundation, charitable foundation, and those weren't always the case. So while the incidents that opened up these things, I don't think should have been the one thing that, and it wasn't. That wasn't the thing that led to the demise of Ann and Tail leaving Tales. It was what that then, people then saw after that. They saw a crack in their character, they saw a crack in the system of Tales, and then as people dug deeper into that, that's when it became more problematic.
Excellent. So once again, we are in the Cause and the Stir segment. So if anyone here in our live audience have questions, this is the opportunity for you to come forward, ask questions. Just come, step up, and we will give you the ask your question. Online. We have says, so okay, here we go again. Someone needs to speak with Essence spokespeople to get an understanding. Or been happening, clarity. So, Matt, can you give us a little clarity on what's happening with Essence Festival when the 10,000 plus people come to New Orleans and bars decide and choose to close their doors? I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you. I think it's an overstatement that bars decide to close their doors during Essence Fest. People welcome Essence Fest to this city. It's a fantastic event. A lot of great people descend on the city. There's a lot of great parties, a lot of great events. My direct experience when I refer to the majority of bars closing, when you see it on the news, it happens around the Bayou Classic. And the Bayou Classic versus the Essence Fest brings out a younger crowd, more college crowd, that college, Southern and Grambling, historical black colleges at the Superdome, great battle of the bands, great event in the Superdome. But at night, the college kids, typically different economic profile for a customer versus an adult who's coming in from Essence Fest, flying from all over the country. And then you have local kids from Baton Rouge and New Orleans coming out, and they get into a rift. So businesses feel some of that negativity, whether it's to their bottom line or the activity on the street, and there is a perception that that's the best weekend to spend time with their families, because it's a 365-day-a-year business essentially, and people do need a little reprieve. Essence Fest is a fantastic event. It's a successful event. We get a lot of great patrons that come down. So I want to be very clear with the perception, in my opinion, of the operators in the street and the city, that Essence is a higher quality customer than some of the college kids or young travelers that come and associate with Bayou Classic. And that comes down to, when I use the word, you prejudge that client base. It's not that anybody thinks they're better than anybody, but sometimes historical data will prove that revenues during Bayou Classic are a lot lower than revenues during Essence Fest. So revenues will predicate what you decide to do with your business. If you're going to make, 10% of what you would normally make on a normal weekend, it's more effective sometimes to just close, spend time with your family, or do necessary repairs, where sometimes then those businesses are negatively affected because social media will take it as, well, you're not open because black people are in town. People are always in town, It's how do people decide to conduct themselves, whether it's a spend, and you vote with your dollars. And people always say, you make a decision on where you want to go based on how you spend. You tell a server how good they were by the quality of the tip and the size of the tip. So you're telling people, like, you appreciate that business and you leave them a tip, and that's how you vote. And when we see people come in, don't spend, or they don't patronize you, and we don't hang black-owned flags outside. That's not the level of business we're trying to be a business to everybody. And I think that there is a perception, and media likes to pick up, it's a black event and people are closing their doors. It's not the case, So I think we have to be very clear, and you have to have a very close connection to the pulse of the community before blanket statements can be made in social media. I think that's sometimes where things get awry.
Are you closed during Essence Festival or Bayou Classic?
No.
All right, so there it is. Hopefully we cleared that up for you, Zandra. Being upfront and honest, she says, needs to happen. Open up the conversation. Josh, do you have any thoughts on what Matthew said?
Well, the one thing, when you mention the media, it's interesting, like you'll see, a situation where some basketball team in the Midwest will lose and the fans will burn cars, and it's like, oh, they're just kids being kids. And then you get, the same a situation where, someone's shot and there's a peaceful protest and it's a riot because everyone on the screen is African American. And I think the media does play into sort of this image of the young black man as a threat, whereas, when white people behave worse, they're just, oh, that's just college kids being college kids. And so I definitely think that I don't know what the solution is in terms of, how do you solve for 20-something, 18 are out there partying, drinking, and they're going to cause trouble. They get their beer muscles on and all sorts. How do you create an environment where you can bring down the level of mayhem that's caused by having 10,000 college-age kids descending on your neighborhood for a weekend?
So since we're speaking of media, it's a good segue into many industry leaders have blackballed myself, J. Wesley Day, the founder of Cocktail Chronicles, your host of 100 Proof, for having mature and healthy dialogue to bring awareness to existing stereotypes, meaning I didn't make the that we can create continuing. Josh, to you, because you've seen some of it. Is this fair to me, the journalist? So inside to my bartenders such as Stir have blocked me. The Black Bourbon Society have blocked me. And others, which the list I can name a half more, have blocked me from being an industry influencer for opening up the lines of communication to discuss biases and stereotypes that do exist. So is this fair? Why do you think I'm being blackballed within the spirits industry?
Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. No, honestly, I think that there is a problem in that you're running a business. This show is not for fun. This is a business. It's to draw an audience. And so you use clickbait. You take topics and you make them as interesting as possible, and you ratchet up, I think, the conflict that's inherently there in the conversation, and that's great for marketing and people engaged. But if you're an organization like Cause a Stir, which is trying to bring that temperature down, I can understand their position about how they don't want to be involved in something that could be perceived of as ratcheting up the conflict. And so, from my perspective, this is the thing that's been really interesting in my life lately. It's been a theme where, in many situations with conflict, both sides can be correct in their position and how they approach it, but is different. And so the reason I can stay at the Cause of Stir House, and I love those guys and they're the best, and I can sit here with you, is because I see where you're coming from and how it is, and we'll have a conversation afterwards about how I think you can help resolve some of these things. And also, I totally understand why they're not here right now. So and that's an interesting question, as well as, how do you have these hard conversations? How do you add that nuance? How do you do it in a way that is respectful, but that is also potentially going to have that flashy thing that's going to bring people there in the first place that you can then start the dialogue with?
So just for clarification, you talked about clickbait. Click definition is when you click on something and it's something different. So what I do respectfully differ with you, that it's not clickbait, because what you click on, I'm able to give you an abstract of the conversation, and I provide stats and facts as a journalist to back up anything that's actually stated. And then all of my topics, I've been doing this for several years, it's a question. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I feel this way, but as journalists, we have to ask hard questions. And it's basically two sides to the table to discuss it. In most of my conversations, I keep my opinion out of it, and I just let the two people or the panelists, I just guide conversation. So it's not necessarily my organizations to watch the show in full before coming to a conclusion, because you'll see that I'm not necessarily giving my the guest on the show giving their opinion about a topic that actually exists or a stereotype that exists. I've never had, of the 3 years of me doing this, having someone say the stereotype does not exist. And so here's one stereotype, and Matthew touched on it a little bit earlier. You mentioned tipping. There's a stereotype that exists that minorities, specifically blacks, do not tip. So if I pose the question, do blacks tip? I should not necessarily be burnt to the cross for asking the question for an existing stereotype. So, Matthew, I'm going to turn to you and ask you your thoughts on what you've heard so far on me being blackballed from the spirit industry.
Well, I don't know enough about that, but it's a funny story. A little. Jay Weston and I met. We actually met because he was upset that he went out at a certain time of night. He was to go get some outside drinks and bring them back into our bar. And at that, we stopped letting outside drinks in the business. And so he felt slighted that he couldn't come back in with 2 outside drinks that we don't sell, that we don't make any money on, but his friends were in the bar. And I got a message at our business that he was upset and he was going to let the world know how upset he was. And I reached out to him and just had a dialogue and said, hey, well, I welcome you back to have a drink with me, and I'll gladly explain why we have this policy, because this is how we make money. We sell drinks in our business. By having people bring outside drinks in, we don't make any money. And we sat down, we had a good dialogue. We actually turned into a little more information sharing and built a relationship from there. But some of that engagement, maybe people are afraid to have that engagement. They'd rather just shut it down and not have that dialogue. And you have to be confident in yourself and your position to be able to head into controversy. And you may, like you said, you may have 2 differing opinions, and you may have strong facts to support your position, but at some point, there's going to be a melding of those positions if you have intellectual people, or you may just agree to disagree and move on. But to say that you're blackballed or not included, I mean, unless you really did something so disparaging or so non-fact based with regard to that, I can't speak. Anybody makes decisions, from a business. That's their business, and I don't know how they run it.
Josh, I know you still have more to say on this conversation, so we're going to stick to it for just a little bit longer, but I want to bring Jen in on it. Is it possible that bartenders could be silenced by being paid from, or employees or consultants of liquor manufacturers, that they can't necessarily give their candid 100% thoughts on a situation? So working for a liquor company, does that silence your own voice?
Oh, that's a great question. We've all seen on the national level many brands that have gotten into trouble on their stances on issues. So you have to with people who believe the way you do. And if you can't have the conversations in a smaller, more quiet way, but don't stop having the conversations. Don't stop believing the way that you do. You just have to change how you speak about it. As a server, as a bartender, there have been times when I 100% wanted to speak my mind and knew it wasn't the time or place, knew I could lose my job because of it, lose employment, lose reputation. For other people, for another person, you sort of have to adhere to how they want to behave as a business, how they want to be seen and viewed as a business. Fortunately enough, I believe that I work for a company that is comfortable with me having difficult conversations, having views that I do. They haven't told, but because I do continue to be very vocal about things that I'm passionate about. Silenced. I've seen it happen time and time again. It really just depends on if you want to keep aligning with that process.
All right, Josh, I still haven't forgotten about you. So for those out there watching, we just want to acknowledge you. Zandra Dorson says, such sensitivity in these topics, and things are racially charged because of social media on all platforms. Be a journalist. Tell the story as best as possible with the facts as much as possible. One thing opens up. If you don't, who will? So, Josh, I want to bring it back to you. What's your thoughts at this point?
So just an example about, you say, I just asked the question. And I think that's a cop-out, because how you ask the question is just as important as the question that you're asking. So you could, you said, you know, do right? You're making an assumption in that statement that they don't, in a way. That's how it can be interpreted, as opposed to saying, why do people perceive that black people are not as good tippers as white people, right? Same concept, same topic, but the way you've framed it, it's now, you're pointing out the problem is the perception, which implies that it's not the truth. Whereas if you say, why don't black people tip, if you're implying that black people don't tip. So I think that's where you've gotten into trouble. And the term clickbait is not exactly right, but in some respects it is, because if you ask the question, you know, like you did this morning, and you started off the show with, is there racism in, you know, is there issues around racism and in the community? Well, everyone knows the answer to that. Of course there are, right? And maybe racism isn't right, or maybe it's prejudice, right? So I think by that alone, you're setting up this dynamic which is intended to be more confrontational, or intended to be confrontational than it needs to be. And so I think that's where Bourbon Street, it gets you in trouble.
No, and I definitely understand, and I truly respect what your thoughts is. It's just a matter of words, but at the end of the day, the stereotypes that I talk about, they do exist. Whether I have to quote the mark, the stereotype exists, and that's all that we do. So we're going to move along into a scenario. Go ahead.
But we're saying it exists. So I guess to add to your point is, what's your experience with it, or why? What's the baseline for your thought process? You know, not to say it's tips. That's like saying black people can't swim, or black people can play basketball, or anything ridiculous. Sometimes it's so extreme or so polarizing. But if there is a baseline for, or you know, I think people as a informed individual, I like to get the facts. I like to know what people's experience has been. What's your experience with tipping? What do you typically see? Is it 20%? Is it 15%? Do you have to feel like you have to autograph a party because a party of 6 minorities versus a party of 6 whites is not going to leave an adequate tip? These are things that I think are all subject to like that moment, you know, and I think then people take away from that and they leave a bigger picture. I mean, they paint a bigger picture. So I think some of these stereotypes that we talk about, you know, there's some truth in some of them. There's a baseline fact in it, but I think to generalize it or exacerbate it, I think that's the problem sometimes what social media is allowing people to do today, or journalism is doing by exciting one side versus the other, just like we had the statues here, and there's thoughts on what should have been done. I think the manner in which they were done was the wrong way, and I think it was the media, individuals driving that, pouring gasoline on that. So I just think we have a responsibility to not yell fire in a theater. We have a responsibility to navigate our engaged reader.
And another just an example of it would be, you know, I'm 6'6", 240 pounds. I can't tell you how often I hear, "Are you a basketball player?" that's a stereotype that because you're tall, one, because I'm black, I'm sure has something to do with it, that I get that question. Another one is because you live in Atlanta, are you gay? It's a stereotype. So if someone, yeah, that's it exists. But the point I'm making is that if someone have a discussion about those stereotypes, if do all tall black men play basketball, it's nothing to get up in arms about. And again, you really have to watch the show, because if you watch my show and you watch my delivery, even with today, I haven't given really one opinion about the topic at all. I just set up the opportunity to get the discussions flowing so we could either kill the myth about black people being per se, or the myth might be, let's kill it. It doesn't exist. I'm an example of that. All people don't play basketball. I can't catch a lick of it. But we want to move on in the show to a scenario. Let's say a host at the front door, it's a Saturday morning, opened up here at the Tequila House, and let's say the entire space is open at that moment in time. So the hostess wants to sit people according to sections. So the black couple walks in through the door. They walk through an entire empty restaurant and get seated in the corner because that's section 1. What is the black couple thinking, Jen? Any thoughts?
I'm going to say, as somebody who has been a hostess and somebody who has been in the service industry for a long time, no one wants to sit where you want to seat them. We do have sections, we do have rotations, we have things like that. No one is ever happy where you want to put them. I honestly cannot speak as to how they would feel. I know there are times I want to be in the back corner. There are times when I want to be in the window. There are times when I want to be... I can't speak on their minds as to whether that would be a problem or not.
Matthew, you want to take a stab at what you might think a couple as they walk?
That's just speculative scenario, again, because you're sitting people based on zones. But, I mean, sometimes you just want to get in and sit down. I never think twice about it. As long as the service is acceptable, clean, I think that's an extreme scenario to hope that you're going to have a charge responsible by where they sit. I really, it's a unique question. I don't think it's I never had an experience where I've had a negative seating environment. So I can't truly answer that. Or if this is the scenario we're going down and we're looking for a black couple being upset, is that what I'm getting at? They're being upset by seating in this section? Well, I tell you, these in New Orleans, the majority of servers and hostesses are people of color, or they're females, for the most part that I've seen. And I've never seen a situation where, or I've never experienced personally a situation where I was put into a negative seat in a business. So I can't say that I've ever experienced that.
All right. So in Washington, D.C., there's a restaurant called Busboy Imports. We may have heard about it. The owner name is Shalal. Mr. Shalal is his last name. And they did a study. And in their study, they found that the blacks that were walked through an empty restaurant and sat at the back corner complained. And most of them complained with race being a factor in their seating. They were, in this case, they were all seated by white hostesses or servers. However, they did the reverse part of the study where they invited white people, walked them through an empty restaurant, set them in the corner, and in most cases, there were no complaints from the white guest. They actually welcomed it and enjoyed having the space to themselves, not thinking race or anything of that nature. And in this case, with the white guest, they had them escorted and assigned by a white host and a white server. So Josh, what's your thoughts on this study?
That's an amazing study. It's also a perfect example of privilege, because the white couple doesn't perceive that they would ever be slighted for any reason, and so the assumption they're going to make is, oh, they put me in the back so we have privacy. It's a nice good for me. Right? They don't not that. Whereas and potentially think, oh well, these white people, they don't want us sitting in the front of the restaurant. People perceiving that this is a black establishment, which may, not put off people or whatever. So that sort of perceived bias that's there in our culture, I think dictates how the same situation, two different people. I think that study is amazing. I hope that study gets a lot more press than it obviously has, because I had never heard of it before. But I think it's really telling, and I'm going to say something which is, I'm not sure I should, I'm worried about saying it, but I can say it right. But I think that's a situation where, if you're always looking for people treating you badly or your race, then you're going to sort of see it, and so I don't know how, change that and sort of, but if there's a way to sort of step back and go, well, make the assumption maybe that not everyone's racist, make the assumption that the reason isn't that, and then wait for a second tell, if you will, to then prove the assumption. But I think if you're always looking for that, it's going to makes things much harder. And I think in most cases, as I said, people not out of ill intent.
We are in of our Cocktails and Diversity Issue Special Edition in New Orleans. We are at the Tequila House on Bourbon Street, owned by Matthew, one of two black bars in the French Quarter. And so we are in the midst of talking about, can bartenders be colorblind? How does your race impact your service? So we're going to turn to Jan. You had some thoughts on what Josh was saying?
Yeah, I would actually like, he said, continue to see numbers on that study, but I would want to see that from a hostess of color seating a white couple to see if there's any perceptions there. And if you're going to cover the bases, cover all the bases and like really get, but yeah, like if you perceive something, you're going to continue to see it. You're going to find the nuances and make it an issue. And I'm sorry, let's go back to the other thing you were asking. Sorry, I was kind of passionate about that right then, but.
So let's go into the point of asking, can bartenders truly be colorblind? Does your race impact your service? Matthew, what's your thoughts on that question?
I think it's a mixed bag. So let's go back to seating, for example. If you're going to go out, you're out for an experience as a couple, right? Traveling, or you're going out to dinner. So engage that moment, be present in that moment, and focus. Like, this is a positive experience. So if I'm going to a place with a hostess, I'm probably going to a nicer place. I'm not ordering at a counter and seating myself anyway. So I think sometimes you just, like I said, you have to have a positive mindset that it's not all bad all the time. And as patrons come into bars, especially on Bourbon Street, especially in the French Quarter, we get a lot of transient travelers, people coming from different places. So sometimes the perception is, from a bartender's perspective, they're never going to see this person again. So they don't treat him as good as they would treat, quote unquote, a local. And that local will get better service. And I've experienced that myself in some places. Until they find out you're local, you get a service. And I think the laziness standpoint, from that bartender's perspective, because they're just indifferent. They don't have to work as hard for that tip. They don't work as hard for that engagement. But that's a culture as well too. So here on Bourbon Street, we do get a mixed bag. We get bachelorette parties. We get fraternities. We get football players. But and I think and as they carry themselves, it's how the server or the bartender will engage them. We host a lot of college events here where sometimes they're younger and they act immature versus an older convention crowd that's a little more sophisticated and more seasoned, and they know how to treat a bartender. So there will be, depending on your color, it's all how you carry yourself. So I wouldn't say it's the idea of being a particular color, but it's that perception you give off as a consumer.
All right, and so Josh, what's your thought? Is it that race impact?
Well, should bartenders be colorblind? I mean, I think back to your study, I think that actually a bad thing. If the hostess is white and there's a African American couple there and they know that this is a perception, then maybe they could say, hey, do you mind sitting in, would you like to sit in the back or the front? Right? They can ask the question. Where do you want to be seated? We have a really nice quiet table in the back. Would you like to sit there, or do you want to sit up front? And then instantly now that interaction has been changed from a perception of racism to them being engaged and them having agency. And so I think the responsibility in that situation is on the server to take into account the biases that exist in our culture. And so if you have a situation where, this is a situation with code switching, right? In terms of talking to different people in different ways. And so I think that is a way of helping people to feel comfortable. And so I think by saying, can they? Well, I don't necessarily think it should be. And maybe at some point in the future that may happen, but probably not, because I think culturally, people are going to always be, there are always going to be differences, and so there's always going to be a certain level there, but hopefully you won't have to fight the negativity. It'll be just the difference between talking to someone from California versus talking to someone from Boston, right? It'll be a cultural thing as opposed to perceived negatives in that conversation. But I don't think that's a good goal right now, to be colorblind.
All right, excellent. So once again, for those that are out there in our live audience, you can stay at the bottom of the stairs and we'll give you the microphone to ask your question. Or at any point, you can walk on up. And for those that are watching online live on Facebook at Rolling Out's page, to continue to give us your question. Justice Frederick, thanks for tuning in. And Rasan says, good point. So with the same owner of Boy and Poets, Mr. Shalal, he considered himself to be progressive in talking about race and biases and stereotypes. The things that I'm trying to do, he's doing from an in-house, on-premise standpoint. And one of the things that he has his staff do, Matthew, is he have index cards with questions. So for example, you can go into Busboy and Poets at any point and the bartender pull a card, they'll give it to you. You pull out the deck, and one of the cards is, did you perceive me to be racist? So that leads me to ask each and every one of you, and I'll start with you, Matthew, is it okay for bartenders to talk race with consumers?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, if I'm a consumer and I'm coming out, I want to have a good time. I want to buy some drinks. I want to talk to my friends. I want to engage people around me. I want to ask the bartender maybe what's going on. I'll listen. I think sometimes there's an charge conversations about use, and alcohol. You're selling dreams by the cup, essentially. You want to have a good time, buy a cup. You want to talk to a girl, cup. You want to look better, you want to dance better, buy a cup. You change people's demeanor when you put them, in a defensive position. Like, do you think I'm racist? I don't know. It's awkward engagement. As a black consumer, I'll go out, and yeah, they may be 3 deep at the bar, maybe slammed. I know I'm going to get service. I'm confident I'm going to get service because not only when they come over to see me, I'm going to make sure I'm going to buy that privilege with a front-end tip. They're going to come back to see me when they come back, and that experience is going to be a positive one. Unless the bartender has a negative demeanor, then I'm going to move on to the next. But I know when bartenders are busy, I'm not here to point at them. I'm not here to wave money because that's some of the negative things that you shouldn't do. And if I'm at a place where the bartender is going to start asking me, do you perceive me to be racist, or my server, again, I go back to the idea that I'm out experiencing my free time away from work with my wife or my friends, and that to me is not the environment that I'm trying to have that conversation, because it's not necessary. If it gets to that, I welcome it, but then I think it just takes me maybe out of that mimosa brunch mode to all of a sudden, is this a real conversation? Is this what people are really worried about in today's society? I think it's that's you have to back up and re-educate to what the engagement is. Is it prejudice? Yeah, I'm prejudiced. I will prejudge somebody in a hot minute because I'm not sure if I'm walking down the street or I'm walking to my bar and they're going to come in. I want to make sure that we're safe. I want to make sure that we're clean. Is that person going to be a problem? Are they drunk? Are they going to start a fight? I'm prejudging that individual, how they carry themselves. And so I'm not racist. I don't think my race is better than their race. And I think that's when you use that word, ask yourself in that context, is this the appropriate dialect? Is this the appropriate vocabulary for this scenario? So I guess if that is the question, I would be put off because it's not even appropriate to the appropriate language, not the appropriate baseline.
One of the things that you said, Matthew, that was prevalent is that you can admit to judging people. I think that that's huge because we often like to think we don't judge, which is the initial question that I asked before as far as being colorblind. Everyone says, oh, I don't judge, I don't judge. No, we all judge. Even if we're judging your hair is nice or your earrings are nice or your outfit is nice, all of that is a judgment. So it's good to hear that, it exists. It's normal. It's natural. And that's what these discussions is about as far as how do we control the negative judgments so that we can move forward. But before we go into solutions, Jen, I want to give you an opportunity to answer the same question as far as going into a restaurant, long day at work, and they're giving you the race card. What do you think about bartenders talking with customers about race, biases, and stereotypes?
I don't feel that it's a conversation that should be forced on somebody. In this particular restaurant that I hadn't heard about, if I'm going out for a birthday celebration, or I'm just going to eat a meal after a long day, and I'm with friends or family, having very, very now as a bartender in a small corner bar neighborhood, you see the same day out, you're going to have other types of conversations with them just in the bars about things like the news. And so in a certain situation, those conversations are going to come up naturally. And I think that in that case, they can and should be had. Conversation guests. At the same, I bartending to push an envelope, and they were expecting a reaction from me, and they were not going to get the level of service that I would have given had they not been trying to egg me on, if you will. There's a time and a place for everything. But yeah, I don't think you should force a conversation on somebody that is sort of, if it's unexpected. Now, if I went to this restaurant knowing that that's what they were about, and I went and I wanted to go experience it, that's a whole nother scenario.
All right, thank you. And I think we have a question from someone here live in the studio. So if you want to just step on up, we'll give you the microphone. And for those of you that are watching, we are in New Orleans with a live audience. Actually, it's my first time, Matthew, doing a live audience. So once again, I want to thank you for allowing us to be here today. Tell us your name, tell us where you're from, and then you can ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Kim, and I'm from Syracuse, New York. I am a bartender, so I wanted to first touch on the issue of being colorblind. As a bartender, absolutely not. There's no way for you to be colorblind when someone comes up to your bar and you're serving. Your goal is to treat everyone, of course, the same. You know, as far as your service, you should be giving same service to everyone. We know there will be the ones that will be antagonizing. There will be the ones that are going to try to entice you to serve them more. But as far as being colorblind, there's just no way. I personally can't see it as being colorblind. I'm going to give all 4 of you the same service across the board, regardless. But the other thing I wanted to say was in regards to what Matthew was saying about, you know, people saying, claiming people are like saying racist. I agree. It's more prejudice than anything, you know, because we do prejudge. As soon as somebody walks up to your bar and you look at them, you mentally already have that perception of what kind of customer they're going to be. Okay, asshole, you know, good person. And it could be, it's all based on your own experience with someone probably who looks like similar to that person. So we all have our own mental thought of, okay, if you walk up to my bar, like you said, you're 6'6", tall black guy, either I'm going to say, he might be a basketball player. Some people might play into that and say, oh, I'm going to give you better service because they think that they're going to get a better tip because they think there's money behind it. And then someone else, you might say, okay, they just want that beer and they're going to drop $1 and think that they've given me, you know, $1 million. So I can see how people do vary as far as what the services that they're giving, but I think it's really truly based on their own prejudging of the person that's in front of them. And the other thing I wanted to point out was what we talked about yesterday was, as a black bartender woman, I wanted to ask Jen, like, as far as your experience has been, have you had guests approach you in a way where it was like, oh, they kind of have that perception of either more seeing not just the fact that you're the bartender, but maybe even just your skin color, saying like, okay, she's not, like, what's wrong with her, like your facial expression, if you weren't smiling at this particular guest and they're like, oh, she must got, you know, she must be we got the stereotype of the angry black woman. So you get that. I get that a lot from other people versus, you know, black people. So have you ever had a situation where someone has accused you or said that was your issue, and how did you deal with it?
Thank you so much for that question.
Yeah, that really is a great question. Yes, absolutely. Time and time again, I've had situations like that happen. I was thinking earlier, even there were, I've worked in a few different bars for many, many years at a time, and we have our local customers come in, and I don't know if you all can see, but I have sort of resting bitch face. So I don't automatically have a smile on my face, even though in the service industry we should. And I might be having a conversation with customers that are regulars, and we have a rapport, and may have been talking about something, and I may have laughed, and then come to a new customer that I don't know. How may I help you? And they're like, I've had somebody kind of call me out for being less pleasant to them because I didn't have a smile on my face at that moment. And I actually said to them, they just told me a joke, did you? I try to make a little light of the situation and sort of put it back on people when I'm able to. I've actually been called racist by bartending when, again, a regular at my bar didn't card them when they walked up. A person of color, I'd never carded them right away. Carded them, they pulled the race card on me. It's like, oh, you just carded me because I'm black. I was like, no, I carded you because I don't know you, and that is the law. This person comes to my bar twice a day, every day. I don't need to card them. As a woman, I've been perceived as being sort of less than as a bartender. They're like, oh, we want that guy to make our drink. You know, we want the man to make our drink.
And I was like, more about women per se.
It's been a mixed bag. Okay. It's been a mixed bag. They just kind of perceive that I'm there as like maybe like a hostess, or I don't know what their perception of me is, but yeah, it's like, oh, well, this guy can make, but like if they want to order like a whiskey drink or something like that, oh, that guy can make it. Or like if they want like something fruity, oh, the girl will make it. You know, I'm a bartender. I can make all those things. He can make fruity drinks. I can make, whiskey drinks. So yeah, it's something I've been aware of several times. Each time I try to learn from it and a better reaction when that comes up, and try to sort of lighten the situation or just make them aware, because perception and prejudices is and we perceive customers before they walk in. We all do it, and it's not necessarily about color. It's more socioeconomic. It's how a person dresses, how a person approaches you. If, like I said, if they want to be combative, they're gonna just start it right away. You're gonna notice it, and hopefully by engaging with them a little bit more, we can change that and make this a little, just turn it down a little bit, and a better experience than they beginning.
And thank you for being here today. I remember meeting you last night and talking about this conversation at one of the Tales events. And for those of you that are watching at 1027, we want to thank you for tuning in to the 45th episode of Cocktails and Diversity in New Orleans with a live audience. So stereotypes and biases. I know you got to go shortly, but I want you to know from what she stated, she used the term angry black woman, which infers that that's a stigma that exists. I turned that into a question. That's what really got me in a hot with a lot of the organizations we mentioned earlier, one being Causing a Stir. So this woman is all the way from Syracuse, New York, and she brought up a stereotype that exists across the board, and that's what I make my discussions about, to try to confirm or eliminate myths through healthy dialogue that we're having today. Dig a little bit deeper just on that term there, which, young woman, I've done that conversation, angry black women. Where did it come from? How do it exist in a healthy type of way? So a Again, I encourage you to go ask the people from Cause and Stir to watch a full episode, and you will see that it's not my opinion. I just open up the dialogue from things that exist. For those that don't know me, I've been a bartender nearly 20 years. I have owned my own bar, club, and lounge in Midtown of Atlanta. I know the stereotypes and most of them that exist, and we need to get rid of them. But how can we get rid of them if we don't want to discuss them? So, Matthew, as a black bar owner, one of two in the French Corner, do you feel that you receive any racial treatment, whether good or bad, good being, oh, he's one of the only black bars on Bourbon Street, let's go support him? Or bad could be you're getting a hard time through the city or other bar owners trying to oust you for being a bar owner on Bourbon Street. Do you experience anything just being a black bar owner by chance? Just curious.
I would say my experience in the community is positive from an administration level with NOPD and the other operators on the street. Focus is a positive engagement, a safe experience for the customers, and driving revenue for employees and operators alike. I don't see regular support from other black patrons because I'm a black business owner. We don't typically market that. It's not something that we pursue. I don't want to placate a customer base because of that. It'd be nice if it was supported in that way, but I really focus on our customer experience for every color, every race, to be a positive one, so that way everybody's coming here, everyone's talking, everyone wants to come and have a good margarita, have a good taco, have a quesadilla, we'll have it sit on our courtyard like adults. But as a black business owner, I feel a responsibility. As a business owner, I feel a responsibility to be, I'm a trustee of this property. It's been here for 300 years. It's going to be here for another 300 years, hopefully in a positive way. So we have an ongoing responsibility to educate ourselves, educate our employees, and educate our visitors to treat it with respect. Don't treat Bourbon Street like a toilet bowl. Don't put yourself in a situation that you would not do in your own home. You know, don't treat it like it's the Wild West. But I think we just have to focus on continuing education for ourselves, for our employees and our customers, just so we can ensure that positive engagement continues.
All right, thank you for that answer. Jenny, since you work with a liquor manufacturer, do you think minorities have the same opportunities to scale upwards in the hierarchy of the corporate world in liquor manufacturers, going from the biggest of the biggest to the smallest of the smallest? Biggest of the biggest are Brown-Forman, Pernod Ricard, Diageo's. Do minorities have the opportunities to climb to the top, as well as small organizations such as Liquor Intense, Tequila? Do minorities have a space in those hierarchies?
Absolutely, and we're seeing time and time again right now that they are being put in those positions. Colin from Bacardi, Erica Rochelle from Grey Goose, they're happening. The changes is happening. They're getting there. I believe that a lot of it has come from people not showing up to the table. Not that they weren't invited, that they didn't know how to get there. I think we need to start educating people on how to get there. Like I see somebody in the crowd there who's fighting her way into great spaces to further her career, and she's taking the steps to learn and to.
What's her name?
Janae, I love you. Go see her at Kingfish. She's fabulous. But you have to take ownership of any sort of education that you want or any sort of job or position you want, you have to take ownership and getting there because nobody's going to do it for you. Like if you get put in place where you didn't necessarily want to be, are you going to own that? Are you going to make it what you need to? I think that as a leader in this community, I volunteer for Bartenders Guild. I'm constantly trying to get new people involved, and I would love to see more people of color involved and to give them the space to what do you want out of your career? Do you want to be a bartender? Some people want to be a bartender because it's fun, because they get drinks, because they can get, girls or whatever. Some people, as I do, see it as a career, see it as a possible being a business owner. So I think it depends on what you want and where you want to be, and then start asking questions on how to get there. Like start, forcing people and brands to be like, what did it take? How may I become there? I don't think that we're keeping people from doing it. It's just nobody knows how. So I would like to see the education and the possibilities be presented that haven't been before.
Excellent. So as we get ready to close out, we want to just acknowledge Zandra. She says, real thank you, Zandra, for watching. So Matthew, what's one of your final takeaways that you want people to take away from this conversation? In that same token, tell people how they can reach you or where you are on social media.
Well, we're down here at Tequila House, 417 Bourbon Street, right in the 400 block, heart of the French Quarter. I think I go and hope that people are responsible for themselves, first and foremost, as a customer, as a server, as an operator, as somebody in this industry. You have a responsibility to yourself first to carry yourself in a professional way, engage others in a meaningful way, in a healthy way. So the second we start doing that, we start taking ownership of our actions. We don't blame other people for something that happened. I mean, really look at the root. Why did the event occur? Why did I get asked to leave the bar? Why did I get bad service? Is it because of the color of my skin, or was I a jerk? Please be honest with yourself when evaluating those situations. People are just so fast to blame somebody else. But come down and see us at 417 Bourbon. My Instagram, I'm not that great at social media, but it's at BigEasy_M. But come down and have a margarita with us. We got great drinks. We got a great venue. Consider ourselves an adult environment here in this Wild West. It's an oasis on Bourbon Street.
All right. And once again, thank you for allowing space. You spoke about how we met. And I think it speaks to how I'm a very reasonable person, that we were able to make amends and come together and even do this. So once again, thank you. I appreciate you. Jenny O, tell us why did I just call you Jenny O? Is that Jen? Where I get Jenny O from? I think Ann Tunerman calls you that. Does she call you Jenny O? Okay, anyway. Tell us what are your final thoughts, what you want people to take away from this conversation, and also tell people how they can find you.
Well, you can find me bouncing around the state, getting people to drink Ghost Tequila. I'm also very prevalent in the USBG, the Bartenders Guild here in town, so if we're putting on an event, I will most likely be there. I think the biggest takeaway is to keep having the conversations, whether they're uncomfortable or not. Keep progressing forward. Just know that there's a lot of us that are more willing to talk about it and willing to do something to change our behaviors, to discuss with people that maybe we can convince them to change their behaviors. Yeah, just keep doing the work.
All right. And once again, I want to thank you for being part of this conversation because it's a heavy conversation. It's a hard conversation to have, but the only way that we can make change in our industry is to have open dialogue about it, to learn why we're doing it and how we can move forward. Before we close out, does anyone in the audience any last thoughts or questions or comments before we close out from our live audience? Any last thoughts, comments, or questions? All right. And for those of you that are watching and tuned in, we want to thank you for taking time to be part of our special edition for our 45th episode with a live audience right here in New Orleans. We want to encourage you to continue to follow me at Cocktail Chron, the number 1. Chron is short for Chronicles. That's CHRON, Cocktail Chron, the number 1. And we want to thank Rolling Out for allowing us to be here today. So be sure to follow Rolling Out at Rolling Out on all social media. Until next time, which will be Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be talking about cocktails and tequila. We may have to have Matthew as a call-in guest to talk tequila. That's National Tequila Day. So producer, get on that. But thank you. Be sure to tune in Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Rolling Out Facebook page about the differences of tequila. Once again, thank you for tuning in with Cocktails and Diversity in New Orleans.